Negative harmony. Now, I think this has the potential to sound quite intimidating. The concept is quite interesting, but I don't think it's that tricky once you get your head around it. So as usual, I'm going to try and do my best to explain what negative harmony is, and then some thoughts on some applications and some takeaways. Also, I've created a free PDF summary of the video too. Yes, I know. You're welcome. Link in the description, possibly in the top corner if I remember to put it there. Okay, negative harmony. So the general gist of this stems from the idea of polarity or reflection, inversion. I'm not too keen on the term negative because I think it sounds too negative, pardon the pun. But I interpret the word negative meaning like a photographic negative, whereby there's an inversion of the bright sections and the dark sections. Probably going to avoid using the word negative. So how does this apply to music? Well, the idea is that a melody or a chord progression or a chord or a pitch has an inversion of itself over an axis. Now, this popular term negative harmony has now become, I think, synonymous with a specific type of polarity over a specific axis. So we'll talk today about that specific technique. Let's go. I think the simplest way to visualize this idea is by taking a melody and reflecting or inverting it. So let's do that. So obviously any melody is just a selection of intervals. Here we start off on our G, and first we move up a major third to a B, and then we move up a semitone, and then we move down a fourth, and then we repeat, and then move down a tone, and repeat, and then we move down a fourth, move up a tone, up another tone, and then we jump up a fourth, and then move down a major third, move down a minor third, and then up a tone to finish. So they're the intervals included in this melody. Now, a simple way to invert this melody would be to take those intervals and flip them. So if we start on a different note, and instead of moving up a major third like we did in our initial melody, we're going to take our starting note, we're going to move down a major third. And then what happened is we moved up a semitone, well, we're going to move down a semitone. And then we move down a fourth, so we're going to move up a fourth. And instead of moving down a tone, we're going to move up a tone. Instead of moving down a fourth, we're going to move up a fourth. Instead of going up a tone, we're going to go down a tone. Instead of going up another tone, we're going to go down another tone. And then instead of going up a fourth, we're going to go down a fourth. And instead of going up a major, down a major third, we're going to go up a major third. Instead of going down a minor third, we're going to go up a minor third. And then we're going to go down a tone instead of going up a tone. And that would be an inversion of that original melody that we had. Now, if we were to put that melody into the piano roll on our DAW and then add the inverted melody, here you'll really clearly see that perfect reflection of the melody. And notice too that our axis point here is directly between E and E flat. Now, the location of the axis is a critical point in negative harmony. So the axis, the point in which we're reflecting our notes over, needs to be halfway between our root and our dominant, between our tonic and our fifth. So in this example, we're in the key of C. So C is our tonic, G is our dominant or our fifth, and exactly halfway between these two notes is the line between E flat and E. So in C major, this E becomes an E flat and vice versa. F becomes a D and vice versa. F sharp, C sharp and vice versa. G becomes a C. You get the picture. Now there's a couple of useful ways to visualize this. Firstly, we can write our chromatic scale around a circle and then draw a line or our axis point between E and E flat. And then we can link up all the corresponding pitches. In the same way, we can take our ever-present circle of fifths and, like I mentioned before, put our line halfway between the tonic and the dominant, so halfway between C and G. And then again, in the same way, all those same pitches will line up to each other and we can connect them. This will come in handy when we want to invert some chords. Now remember, here we're just working in C major, so why don't we just take the notes from C major scale and reflect them over that axis and see what those pitches become. Notice anything? So the notes of C major, when reflected, actually become the notes of C natural minor. Interesting. Now please note that our axis point changes depending on what key we're in. It's always between the root and the fifth, halfway between. So in the key of F, our axis would go halfway between F and C, which is right between A flat and A. So we've just seen that in the key of C, our note F becomes a corresponding D note when we invert it. But in the key of F, our note F becomes a C. So be mindful that our results are different depending on what our key center is. Okay, so what's the big deal about putting this axis in this very specific place? Can't I just put the axis anywhere and invert over wherever it is? Well, you can do, and you can free to explore whatever you like, but it wouldn't be considered this idea of negative harmony that is commonly used. Now, this negative harmony works really well because of this axis between halfway between the root and the fifth, because what it does, it creates the same or comparable pull to the tonic that our major scale harmony does. I'll try and go through this quickly, but essentially within our major scale we have three tones which are stable: our root, our third, and our fifth. They're stable tones within our key, and the other notes are unstable. They feel like they need to move either up or down to find some stability. Now if we look at our major scale and how it's mapped to become our C minor scale over this axis, we'll see that our stable tones are mapped to stable tones, and our unstable tones are mapped to unstable tones. So when we invert a melody or chord progression over this axis, it retains that pull that our ears are accustomed to. And that's why this version of harmonic polarity has become the standard. Right, let's talk chords. We looked at converting a melody. How do we do the same thing with chords? Well, it's pretty much as you would expect. We look at the individual notes of the chords, we flip them on the axis, and those three new notes we put together to make our new chords. Let's start by adding chords to our original melody. And now let's convert those chords to negative harmony chords to accompany our inverted melody. So our C chord contains the notes C, E, and G. C maps to G, E maps to E flat, the G maps to C. Our next chord, F, F, A, and C. F maps to D, A maps to B flat, C maps to G. A minor, A, C, and E. A maps to B flat, C maps to G, E maps to E flat. And finally our G chord, G, B, and D, maps to G, maps to C, B to A flat, D to F. So now we've got the chords for our inversion. Now when we're thinking about inverting our chords over the axis, there's a way to think about the root note. So if we take our G chord that we just inverted, we took that G, we flipped it over the axis, that G, the root note, becomes a C. So does that mean therefore that with our inversion that C should also be the root note? So with those other two notes it becomes what, some sort of C sus4 sharp 5? No, it doesn't. We need to think about our original chord and how it relates to the tonic in that key. So G, that G chord, was a chord built a fifth up from the tonic. So now our new chord is going to be a fifth down from the tonic. So taking those notes again, a fifth down from our C is an F. So F becomes the tonic. F, A flat, C. It's an F minor. So our G major becomes a negative F minor. Does that make sense? Right, here's our negative or inverted melody along with its chords too. So that's the general gist of negative harmony, taking an existing melody and or chord progression, flipping it on an axis, a specific axis. So what are some applications of this concept, and is there any other value we can take from it? Now, you could just use this as a means to experiment and explore in your compositions, but I think it could be a really cool device for something like film scoring, where maybe you want to move to a new contrasting section, but still have some sort of reference or through line from a previous theme or section. I think this device could work really effectively here. I'm briefly going to draw a link here to modal interchange. Now, modal interchange is this technique where we can borrow chords from a parallel key to use temporarily in our existing key. The most common use of this is where we borrow chords from the parallel natural minor. So, for example, I could be in the key of C major and borrow chords from C natural minor, and then resolve back to C major. Now, the result of reflecting our chords and melodies through negative harmony, as we've already discovered, is that we create chords and melodies from our parallel natural minor, just like that example of modal interchange. So, like I mentioned, we could really effectively move within a piece between our original melody and then an inverted melody in harmony, and then even return back to our original melody. So we could take the piece that we looked at before, and it's a 4-bar piece. I could keep the first and last bar in our original C major, and then the middle 2 bars in C minor. And so that would be... What that means is that these negative harmony pieces don't need to exist in isolation on their own. We can combine compositional pieces and sections with an invert of itself. I can see how that could be a really effective compositional tool. Another valuable thing that I think we can take away from this concept is the idea of moving plaguily, the approach to a resolution in fourths, which is kind of the wrong way around the circle of fifths. We already know and use plagal harmony. There's a common 4-to-1 plagal cadence, or the minor 4 minor plagal cadence. But we don't really, with our Western major scale harmony, get to explore much more of that clockwise movement around the circle of fifths. If we think about our circle of fifths, I think typically within our Western harmony, most of our harmonic movements stay on the right-hand side of our key center and then typically move anti-clockwise towards our resolution. But I think negative harmony can get us thinking the other way around, where our harmonic movements can be more on the left-hand side of our key center, with movement clockwise in fourths to a resolution instead. Now, an example of this is a pretty common chord progression like... It's got strong movement in fifths, anti-clockwise around the circle of fifths to our resolution. Now, the negative harmony version of this would be... That's not an unfamiliar sound, is it? So if I go back to our initial progression there, that 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, and add sevenths to those chords, and just play the thirds and sevenths, we get this lovely voice leading that comes through. See how nice that was? Now, if we did the same with our negative harmony, those sevenths that we've added, they actually become sixths in the negative harmony. So they're acting as a seventh. If we did the same thing, we get the same lovely voice leading too. So I'm resolving there to the C minor, which is the negative harmony 1 chord. But that just as well resolves to the C major. So we could just as easily go. It just shows us that movement in fourths is still a strong movement resolution. That movement clockwise around the circle of fifths still leads us nicely to the 1 chord. So we could incorporate that even within our major key. So while we're thinking about C with C major, we could still use that other movement to get us back to that 1 chord. I think it's worth experimenting with. So that isn't necessarily an application of negative harmony, but it is recognizing something that is revealed, that pull down in fourths to a resolution. I think it's definitely worth utilizing in other areas. So that's my overview of negative harmony. I hope it's been useful or interesting. Don't forget to grab the PDF that I've made to accompany the video. And thanks for being here.